you can't love somebody unless you love yourself first. So what do you think is the first steps for somebody that wants to be in a committed, loving relationship?
Prioritization of the internal experience and knowing that your internal experience and what you feel is your highest authority. You either like it or you don't.
And it's that simple.
It's so
It
simple.
is that simple. And what's required to create change in a relationship is both people coming together for them to both co-create solutions that help both of them become more of who they want to be.
Welcome to 80/20. I'm Shanina Shaik, and I'm here with Georgia Sinclair, of course, and I'm so excited to have this guest here today. He is a certified psychotherapist. I follow him all the time. He is like my guru that I wake up to every morning. He is a holistic therapist named Flynn Skidmore.
Hey.
And my first question to you, what is a holistic therapist? We have a therapist, but what is a holistic therapist?
Yeah, I'm dying to know the answer to this question.
So if you think about what it means to be a person or what it means to be a self, a lot of people, when they answer that question, they would say, oh, I'm my name or I'm my story, right? The way that I think about it is what I am is whatever is happening internally in me in this moment. And then I form my identity based on patterns of whatever my internal experience is in this moment. So right now in this moment, I'm experiencing a whole lot of joy and excitement to be here. And if I'm living my life where my primary internal experience is joy and excitement and awe and wonder and curiosity, then that's who I am, right? So there's the internal experience, the deepest layer of who I am. And then that expresses itself in layers outward. So then there's my body, my mind, my beliefs, my closest relationships, what my apartment looks like, what neighborhood I'm living in, what country I'm living in, what universe I'm living in. This experience that I have of myself internally is the result of the relationship between all things happening at my deepest core throughout me outward to the relationship I have with people around me, my environment, and then back in. So when we're talking about holistic therapists, what I'm really speaking about is most people have patterns of shame and fear. That's what's happening internally. And then that moves out to express itself in their bodies, in their beliefs, in their perspectives, in their thoughts, the way they relate to other people. That shame and that fear moves through the layers to build a life of shame and fear for them, build their environments with shame and fear. And then in order to engage in those environments and those life and those relationships, to maintain those environments, it requires the continuation of shame and fear. So when I'm working with people, what I'm working on is, what are the ways in which you've built your life with shame and fear? What are the patterns? What are the relationships? What are the dynamics? What's your body? What's your movement like? And do you like that? Because if a person likes it, then there's nothing to change. I'm not one to say that shame and fear is bad. Will it contribute to disease and earlier death? Yes, but I don't know that that's bad. It's just a result. Most people would say, no, I don't want shame and fear. I want love and joy. And so when a person says that, say, okay, beautiful. Well, let's start to learn about who you are as you build a life with the intention of cultivating this internal sense of joy and love.
Wow, we're only a couple of minutes into this episode and I'm already like, Flynn, you're hired. I mean, everything you just said, I went, my life's built on fear and shame. That's terrible. I've got to fix this.
What did you find? What did you see, or what did it bring up for you?
Exactly that, I feel like, I'm definitely moving in the right direction, especially with starting this podcast with Shanina, because for both of us, this was a very authentic next move and something that we both really, really wanted, that brings us both a lot of joy and excitement, similar to you. But I feel like there's a lot of things in my own life that stem from fear and shame. My dating life, other career choices I've made, even the way I treat my body and I view myself comes from that. So what you just said, you'll be getting a call from me.
Yeah. No, I can relate to that too. We're talking about I'm in a good place right now. I'm feeling on a high. But the fear and shame I've definitely, where I've had to look at myself, is my relationships. There was a point where I've been dealing with depression, and it's just, it was so bad. It was just like, what? Like, it was like the repetition of it was just like, okay, I don't want to live in fear and shame anymore, because it's like there's a problem here. I'm repeating something and it sucks and it's hurting my life in so many ways. I think
it's a ripple effect.
Yes.
it's a ripple effect. And but I also learned that it's something that I have to work on, and it's actually not about the other person. Where we like do this thing where we like, it's the shame, or like, oh, sorry, the blame is like somebody else and it's not me. But I've learned like the big girl step is, no, there's something wrong with me, that why I keep attracting certain situations.
It's the same person in different clothes every time, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and with my job as well, like the fear and shame of how I view myself and my body. I think a lot of women do that a lot to fit in or just feel confident, or, you know, we're talking about like social media, like comparing ourselves as well. I'm a bit of a perfectionist.
Ooh, perfectionism. I'd love to talk to you about perfectionism.
Yeah.
Can I touch on something before
Yeah.
perfectionism?
Yeah.
Which is what I heard you say is, okay, I'm starting to recognize that the patterns in my life may be built from this internal experience of fear and shame. And I notice maybe I tend to blame other people for that, or blame things outside of me. But if this is a pattern, then maybe there's something that I'm doing here. Or maybe there's something about this that I'm choosing, I'm attracted to, I'm attracting. But what I heard you say was that I'm doing something wrong. And I think that's a really, really important thing to address, because there's certainly a version of it where you see it as doing something wrong. There's another version where you operate with the perspective that the patterns that I have built up until this point in my life are truly, sincerely my best attempts at experiencing love, given what I had known at the time. That was actually what you were doing to access love, or trying to do to access love, safety, and belonging. You just didn't yet know a better way. You didn't have the information that you needed to make different choices that were actually produce the experience you want. Let's take like a simple example of like looking for validation by getting a text back from someone.
Oh my
you text
God.
you know, like it's the worst feeling ever, right?
Yeah.
And they don't text you, or they don't text you enthusiastically enough, right? You wanting that text and thinking that that text is going to be the thing that's fulfilling is your current best version of accessing love, safety, and belonging. And you're operating with a part of you who truly, truly believes that. And I think that when we see that as like something wrong with me, it makes it harder to relate lovingly to that part of us who had been trying to get validation or love that way. Whereas when you see, okay, I know that this was me seeking love. Let me learn about that part of myself who learned to seek love through getting validation from a text from a man before 11 a.m., whatever it is. Relate to that part of myself lovingly. When I relate to that part of myself lovingly, that's when it like blossoms up like a flower, and it can take in new information about what might work even better to build a life, to experience love, and to build a loving life.
I feel like the response is generally to be very self-critical, isn't it?
Yes.
And I mean, that just perpetuates, and you know.
So let's think about
deeper.
it like this: like when you're being self-critical, what's the internal experience? What's happening internally for you?
For me, it's in a monologue, I guess, of like, oh God, no, you know, what did you do to make that person not text you back?
Yes.
Like, were you too loud? Were you annoying? Are you not pretty enough? Are you not smart enough? Is there someone else that's better than you?
Yes.
And you just go on this spiral.
Yes. And if you think about like when you're in that place, there's someone that's better than you. What'd you do? Like how would you describe the feelings in your body? Or if you're watching yourself in that state where that's what you're seeing, what does your body language look like? And what's your sense of what's happening internally, like the feelings there?
Fear, shame, anxiety.
Right.
Just feelings associated with low self-esteem, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's happening is you're recognizing a pattern that's based in shame. So my pattern that's based in shame is seeking validation through a text. And then the way I'm responding to that shame-based pattern is with more shame. I'm trying to solve the problem of shame by shaming myself. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When the opportunity is to say, okay, here's this pattern of shame. It's not good or bad. That's just not what I want. That doesn't feel good for me. That's not the experience I want to have. I want to practice love. I want to practice joy, enthusiasm, excitement. So what is the joyful or loving way of taking a look at this pattern? And how can I develop a perspective of the mistakes that I've made that actually create an internal experience of love for me?
So what piece of advice would you give to somebody who's spiraling like that to break that pattern?
Great question. So what I always say with people is if someone is spiraling and they're at more than a 7 out of 10 in terms of intensity, and sometimes that happens, like people's bodies will freeze. I've been in that place before where I was in a relationship with a person that just like wasn't texting me enthusiastically enough. And for say it was taking over my whole world, like driving me crazy. I couldn't think about anything but that.
Yeah, all over a text.
Yeah, all over,
You're
like
waiting
not getting,
anxiously
Yeah.
and for that high.
Yeah.
They're like, for me, sorry, like I sometimes will be like waiting for the text, and then when I get the text, it's kind of like a release.
Yes.
Like, okay, I feel validated now.
Yes.
Like it's okay, but it's like
I'm lovable.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
anxiety to build up. It's like you can't. I'm like, for me, I'm like, you can't live life like this. This is ridiculous.
Well, what's happening there is actually, it's the same thing that happens with addiction. A lot of people who are in patterns of addiction, you think about like a little kid with a non-loving, a home life where they're neglected, not given a lot of love, right? They don't feel nourished and energized and safe in that environment. That kid goes to school, they're probably not doing their homework, so they don't feel nourished and safe in their school environment. They feel shamed, right? They don't ever raise their hand, they're unprepared. They get home and their parents don't get home until 5. So they have this window from 3:30 to 5:30 where for the first time ever, they feel a little bit of safety. What that kid might do would be smoke weed, watch porn, smoke cigarettes, play video games, whatever it is, text, like.
Wait, did we grow up together? Because I feel like you're describing my childhood
you
here.
have that experience, right?
Yeah.
So you get, it's like, oh my God, I get to feel safe. For a second, I get to just feel okay in my body. What that little kid's nervous system is learning is that in order to access feeling good, it requires all of that buildup of stress. So I get stress built up to here, oh my God, then I get relief. And then in order to get relief again, I have to build up all this stress again. That's what the addictive pattern is, right? It's the same thing with texting.
Yeah.
You get the relief from the text, and then all of a sudden you have to attract all that and choose all that chaos unconsciously so that you get the relief of the validation text.
I actually saw a clip on Instagram the other day, and I would love to get your take on this. It was another therapist who was describing the root cause of ADHD, which I have ADHD.
Me too.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is a really interesting clip for me. And he said that he doesn't believe it's actually something that you're born with. It's something that you learn, and it stems from childhood and constantly being in a state of fight or flight. And what happens when you're in fight or flight? Well, you're running, and you feel like you can't get away from whatever's coming after you, so you just freeze.
Mm-hmm.
And so his theory is that's what ADHD is that you don't know what to do, life's overwhelming, everything's too hard, so you just stop.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think that that's right. So here's a framework that I think is helpful to understand this. We have 2 versions of ourselves. We have our parts, which are our very human selves, who are interested in our physical survival, interested in belonging, and interested in status. And those are all very human things. And then we have our infinite self, which I always call our wise, loving grandma, the grandma who's 13 billion years old because she's been around for the entire existence of the universe. Wise, loving grandma has seen everything and is at peace and calm and confident and curious and loving and warm no matter what. So wise, loving grandma loves the person in prison who's done the most horrific crime, which means that wise, loving grandma loves all of the versions of you who make all the mistakes that you make, all the versions of you who want status and validation and all that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. When we're operating with the ADHD or anxiety energy, what's generally happening is that a part of us has taken over who has lost connection with wise, loving grandma energy. It's a part of us who thinks that they're alone, that doesn't perceive that it belongs to a tribe. And it perceives that there is a threat right here, right now, in this moment, even if we're in this room and there's no apparent threat. These parts of us are terrified of rejection and not having status and not belonging and not having love. And when we are not, remember before I was talking about relating to ourselves lovingly, when we're not developing a loving relationship with those parts of ourselves, they think that they're alone, and that's when they freak out. And that's what happens with ADHD, is when these parts of ourselves think that there's a threat right now and scramble to find safety or belong in any way that they can. They think that there's a problem right here, right now, so they go up into the prefrontal cortex, the thinking mind, to try to solve the problem, even though the problem does not currently exist. And it just creates all of this chaos all over in the nervous system.
Wow. It's
So
like a
it's-
safety mechanism to protect
Yeah.
yourself.
It's exactly right. The ADHD part is doing the best that it can, given how it perceives the environment, because it's lost touch with the relationship between the infinite self, the wise, loving grandma. It doesn't know that it's unconditionally loved. It thinks it has to work or figure something out to get love.
My God, I really relate to everything you
You
just
bet.
said. Yeah. So as somebody who personally experiences ADHD, what advice would you give to other people that struggle with the symptoms of ADHD to connect with, with billion-year-old grandma?
Yeah, I love that. So some of the essentials are physiology. So food, sleep, nasal breathing, movement, time in nature, hydration. If the physiology is not taken care of, there's almost no point in doing anything psychologically. The physiology, even just like bare minimum, getting 7 hours of sleep, staying hydrated enough, eating home cooking meals, trying to breathe through your nose most of the time.
How to do a lot of this.
That stuff is
Step one.
essential.
Yeah.
It sets the physiology up to be able to be psychologically adaptable. So that's one thing. My story I think everyone has a different path with ADHD, and an interesting thing to consider is that ADHD often shows up differently for women than it does in men. So it often gets misdiagnosed or undiagnosed in women and more diagnosed in men. For me personally, my story, my path has been barely graduate high school, barely graduate college, feel frantic. My mind is exploding. I don't know where to ground myself. I don't know how to be safe, but I know I have something in me that's special. I know I have something to say.
Yeah, you're clearly a highly intelligent person.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I saw myself that way, but I had nothing in my life to prove it because my mind was all over the place. I didn't know how to build anything. Actually, what I was doing at the time was thinking that I was so special because of being smart and wanting the world to recognize me for that, and thinking that I should have gotten jobs or been recognized by the world as getting certain things, entitled to certain things just because I had a certain perspective without having spent the time building anything that actually made me valuable. And so that was a very ADHD thing for me too. I didn't want to take the time to build because the idea of spending years building something was terrifying because I wanted everything to change in this moment right here, right now, which is a very ADHD thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can relate.
What is yours? Like, how do you scope your ADHD?
Super similar. I mean, I feel like we're kind of twins in a way. I went through school. I didn't study a day, and which I feel like is pretty common for people with ADHD. We have a hard time concentrating, so therefore we just don't. So I got through school based on my own, just being intelligent enough to get through school, but I didn't absolutely crush it like I could have because I didn't apply myself. Same thing with college. And I just kind of dipped out and embraced my creativity as soon as I possibly could because I found it a lot easier to just go with the tide, I guess. And for me, it was music, it was doing television, it was stuff that didn't involve me sticking my nose in a book all day. But I can totally relate to what you said as far as, you didn't want to put the time in, you just wanted to go from 0 to 100 real quick.
Yep.
Because you don't. You sort of think, well, I'm smart, I can get there, but there's, you gotta climb every rung on the ladder, don't you? So
How did it happen did you have a moment where you realized, wow, maybe the conventional path is not for me and maybe this other more creative path is gonna be more nourishing and expansive?
Yeah, I mean, I just would constantly get into trouble when I was, in school or university or whatever. I mean, I was just constantly getting in trouble for being late, not concentrating, making jokes, being the class clown, not handing my assignments in on time. It was just, everything was shame, I guess. And I just sort of, I got lucky that I fell into television, and it was something that made me, it really flowed for me. I don't find it difficult to sit down and have a conversation. I find it really lights me up. So I think I got lucky that I stumbled into something, and then music was always a really big part of my life. So going into DJing, that was kind of had a natural progression too. But I think it took me until I hit my 30s to really learn that, hey, don't commit to stuff that doesn't come naturally to you, because you're just not going to do it. So it was about sort of, I had to kind of hire myself, I guess. I had to sort of go, you're gonna be a good host, so you can say yes to that. You're gonna be a great DJ, so you can say yes to that. You're probably not going to be so good at the admin side of things, so you should probably pay somebody else to do that.
That would be very difficult, I think, for someone with ADHD trying to be in a 9-to-5 job every day, having a routine, trying to apply themselves. And I can't imagine if you were not diagnosed and whatever your family structure or your environment, it's like, no, you have to do this, you have to be this. And the pressure and the shame that comes with that, I can't imagine. And also like going through school and not knowing what you have, like that'd be so difficult as well. I can't imagine what that's like. Yeah, I'm just like looking at it. It's very scary to think that there's kids out there and just not being diagnosed and being shamed upon with just maybe having a learning disability, they call it, but it's not really,
I mean, you sort of slip through the cracks a bit, don't you? I think in the standardized schooling system, at least I did. I sort of, I was branded the naughty kid from very early on, and I guess I just sort of assumed that role. I'm like, oh well, I'm the naughty kid. I'm the kid that's got the biggest truancy record, of the year level.
And think about it like this, so when you're speaking about being on TV or DJing, what I'm assuming, and you speak about being a natural at it, what I'm guessing, and you let me know, is that in those environments when you're doing those things, you're having an internal experience that you really like.
Yes.
You really like what it feels like to be in that place doing that thing.
Yep.
Whereas when you're in school, you're not having an internal experience you like. And actually, for a person who's navigated trauma and who has a highly activated nervous system, the idea of being forced to sit for a long period of time is it makes the trauma worse. So you have a kid whose nervous system is going crazy. They're being told that what they're supposed to do is sit, and they're being forced to sit. And then they're being told that they're bad for not being able to figure out how to sit. That's massive amounts of chaos. Yeah. And rather, I love schools in many ways. I love teachers, I love counselors, but where a lot of mistakes are made is that no one came up to you and said, hey, what is the internal experience you're having? Do you like this experience? What experience would you like to have? And how can we construct an environment for you where you get to have the internal experience you want to have? That would be beautiful if we could do that for kids. And I understand the limitations and why we can't. But instead of someone being curious about your internal experience and working with you to collaborate solutions that would have helped you become who you want to be, you got shamed for it and you were told that you were bad. So then you internalized it. You internalized other people and other institutions' incapacity and lack of curiosity about what was happening for you.
So would that be your biggest advice for parents, caregivers, or teachers about how to maybe break through with some of these kids that are sort of slipping through the cracks?
To me, I think that actual curiosity without needing to control outcomes is the most powerful thing. I've spoken to a whole lot of different type of people. People who have done things that the world would consider to be bad. People who are in prison. People who are pastors and who the world would consider to be good. I've never met a single person who, when actually in a space where someone is curious about who they are and what they want, has said, I want hate, I want violence, I want chaos, I want fear. I've never met a single person who has said that.
Yeah. Even violent people in prison.
Even violent, and I'm sure there are some. I'm sure there is a small percentage of the population who would say yes, I want fear and chaos. I have never met a person who's like that.
Yeah.
Every single time, and this has been thousands of times, where I've seen a person in an environment where they're not being judged and someone is actually curious about who they are and what's happening in their internal world, that person wants love and belonging. That's what everyone wants. Most people haven't been taught how to actually achieve love and belonging. So the person who's in prison is in some ways operating the same way as the person who's desperately waiting to get a text back. Everyone wants this internal experience of love, but people are just sort of misguided in where they're focusing in their intention and energy in order to actually experience love.
Right.
Is it like, for example, adapting to the environment because they weren't shown what that is? So like the shame and fear is just like, well, I had to adapt to that because that was my only choice.
Yeah, so I grew up in Brooklyn in a mostly Black and Puerto Rican neighborhood. And it was like lower middle class. So some gang activity there, went to public school, so exposed to gang activity through that. I was a school counselor in the school district of Philadelphia. Philadelphia has the highest levels of extreme poverty in the country. 25% of the people live at the time, 25% of the people in Philly are living in extreme poverty. If everyone is seeking love, safety, and belonging, and everyone is seeking status in their own way, we're all doing that. No matter what a person is seeking belonging and status, if you're in an environment where the version of belonging and status is to be the toughest or the most violent, then that makes a lot of sense. I personally operate with the understanding that if a person is given two choices, and they are actually given two choices, like fully supported, and do you want to achieve status in the most violent way, or would you like to achieve status in the most loving way, and I'm here to help you do either one, whichever one you want, I think that most people, let's even say 60%, but it's probably actually more than 90% would choose the loving thing. Yeah. It's just that people don't perceive that as available. So then the obvious thing is to choose fear, violence, those sorts of things, chaos.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you, how did you become a therapist? What was your journey?
Okay,
Great question.
Great question. So when I was 18, in college, really like not doing any work, really struggling, smoking a lot of weed. Can I say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're in California.
Okay, amazing. Smoking an immense amount of weed and like watching videos at 3:30 a.m. on consciousness and outer space and those sorts, like doing that sort of thing.
Definitely been there.
Do you know how that is, right? Like you know that phase.
Yeah.
So I was playing baseball and then I injured my shoulder and I got my third surgery within a year and a half, so I had to stop playing. Or I chose to stop playing. And then the only thing that I could do was do yoga. So I was smoking a lot of weed and doing yoga, and I would have these experiences where I just started to understand mind-body connection. I started to understand if I'm experiencing joy, my body looks and moves a particular way. If I'm experiencing fear and shame, my body looks and moves a particular way. I want to understand what that is. I want to understand what that is and how to harness it so I can change and become whoever I want to be. At the time, I was also starting to see like, oh, the way that we understand genetics is not actually how genetics works. And the way that we understand the brain is not actually how the brain works. That doesn't make sense to me, that you just get these fixed traits in genes and you get these fixed traits in how your neurology is structured. And that's that. I was like, wow, no, like I think an almost infinite amount of change is possible. I think any person can change almost infinitely, and they can change their DNA and they can pass that on to their offspring. They can change their neural networks and their neural patterns. Like I really believe that that's true. And so I became obsessed with learning about that. And when I first became aware of those things, the only mechanism that I had for change was self-hate and self-criticism. Like when you said, like, there's something wrong with me. I didn't know that. I didn't know how to use love to change things. I only knew how to use hate and shame to change things. So I would see all these things about myself that I wanted to change, and I hated them. And then I just amplified this experience of self-hate
Yeah, I feel like that's the default, isn't it?
That's
You
the
go,
default.
well, something's wrong with me,
Yes.
therefore, well, I suck.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And then it makes the problem worse.
Yeah.
It makes the problem worse. But in some ways, it's almost this beautiful thing where the self-hate added on top of the shame and the fear makes it so loud and so big that you have to change it because you can ignore it if it's quiet, you know? So it's almost like a beautiful thing happening.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah, no, go on. I was saying in my personal experience as well, like it just like tumbleweeds. It's going to keep coming to you. Like if you ignore it, it's like your brain's like, oh, I'm going to bring it back up for you. It's going to keep coming and coming and you're adding to it. And it's just like, all right, I have to deal with it.
Yes.
Yep.
And the way that I see that is when we are operating with shame or fear like that, it's truly because we're operating through a part of us who believes that shame and fear is the right thing. It's the best way to navigate an environment, which like what you learned in school is that the way to, your role in this school was to internalize this shame and be in trouble. So you're learning that shame is the appropriate internal experience to have in that environment.
Yeah, I didn't know how else to, I just knew how to be the naughty kid. That was like, that was my whole journey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that becomes this part of you, and like your access to safety is actually shame. So what we get to do is to recognize that, wow, this is truly a part of me who actually believes that this is the best thing to do in order to survive this environment. And rather than gaslight that part of ourselves and be like, no, that's wrong, there's nothing to be ashamed about, lean in and become curious about that. Like, where did you learn that? What do you, let's say you experience the most amount of shame in the world. What do you hope that does for you? What are you hoping happens as a result of all this shame? And like really leaning in to become curious about the parts of ourselves who are operating with all that critique and shame.
So you would say the best way to start attacking or to start breaking this pattern of responding with shame is to sort of lean in and go, you know, for example, let's say I think I've got fat thighs. I do think I've got fat thighs.
Me too.
Yeah, right.
Oh my gosh.
Which is just a typical girl thing, and everyone might laugh at me. Whatever, we're all insecure about stuff.
Yeah.
Is to actually go, okay, at what point in time and why did I decide I had fat thighs?
Yes, and to take it even a step further, what we want to learn about, because one of the mistakes that people make, which I think is a really understandable mistake, is let's say you're like out on a date with a guy and he puts his hand on your knee and then like you see him look at his hand and then he moves his hand away, right? Your automatic narrative would probably be, oh my God, he noticed that my thighs are fat. Right, something like that, and he's disgusted by it,
that we're talking
like that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, he's disgusted by it. That's what he's having.
Yeah.
What a lot of people try and do is say, "Oh, you're making assumptions. You don't know what he's thinking. Like that may not be true." I don't like that. What I like doing is saying, "Okay, this is the voice of a part of me who's terrified. I want to learn about the terror." This part of me is terrified of the idea of this dude pulling his hand away because he thinks my thighs look fat. Let me actually lean into that. What is so scary about that? If this man does think that, if he doesn't like my thighs, then what? What happens then? Go ahead.
I'm like, I feel like at school, where you feel like, oh, I'm not good enough. He must like something else. There's something, maybe, there's another girl. I'm not good enough because I need to be perfect in a different way.
And let's go with that. So let's say you're like, okay, well then I'm not good enough and he likes another girl. Then what? What happens after that?
Meanwhile, the poor guy's just sitting there and he's just like, I need to scratch something.
And then, he was like uncomfortable. He was like insecure too.
And then I'm not pretty enough. And then it turns into, I'm not deserving of love because I'm not pretty enough. And
yes.
Then it goes.
And so if I'm not pretty enough, then I'm not deserving of love. And then what happens if I'm not deserving of love?
Then we shame ourselves.
And so can you see, like if you don't even have to close your eyes, but can you see the version of yourself who's learned that in order to get love, she has to be pretty? Like, can you sense that part of you?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little Georgia learned that.
Yeah, I think from my experience, for what I do, and I've learned this, my behavior is I have to give love to get love. So I'm like, I have to like keep giving something to like, to be like worthy enough of love.
Yep.
And make yourself indispensable so they can't live without you.
Yeah, like I have to be this good. So there's just like, they're not going to leave. Like, and there shouldn't be a reason to, because I'm good. And it's like, but I'm doing all the wrong things.
Right.
And then I spiral down, or have spiraled down to being, no one cares about me. I'm not good enough. They always leave me. I'm not worthy. And then I go, I'm not pretty enough. There's something else. Like, that's my big main, like, top 5.
Yeah.
Starting 5.
Yep.
Yeah. And then it goes into like stress, anxiety, and shame, and lack of self-worth. It's little things like that. I have a thing with in my feeling like my butt. I'm like, I wish my butt was like more quirky or like big enough as well. And then, no, it's true. I've gone there, and then I feel like,
I know, and everybody's knee-jerk response to that is they roll their eyes like I just did because Shanita's so gorgeous.
yeah.
But the opportunity is to be like,
Yeah.
if you had this
Had a-
different butt, what would that do for
exactly,
you?
I'll be more worthy. Like, oh, they'll like me more, or I'll feel more good about myself.
Right.
Do you think that's really true, though? If you actually get real with yourself about it, do you think that would change anything for you?
Old Shanina,
Yeah.
I'll be like something. Yeah, I wish like maybe if I had added something a little bit more. I'm not adding like, doing surgery, but like if I had something more of that, maybe they'll look at me more. Maybe they'd be more interested. Maybe they'd be more I'll be more attractive. Maybe, and then I'm like, I'm more good enough, and they'll feel like there'll be nothing wrong with my situation. Now I'm just like, I'm beautiful the way I am. I have so many amazing qualities about myself. Nothing in my body is going to make someone want me. It's about how I look at myself and how I perceive myself.
Right.
And what makes me unique. Because this is, to me, this is just the shell. What's inside is what matters. And also, maybe I need to be attracting somebody that's going to just love me for just how I come and, and how I was, born into this world. Because there's going to be, I've been shamed before because of my body. In a relationship.
Same. But
yeah, it's been
I feel like most people,
and that's where I can see that stems from, where I've had like I've had a ex of mine saying like, oh well, if you like worked out more, you like got this, or like, and then I'm like, I've always had issues with how I looked at my stomach and then my butt, because then I'll be more attractive, and just like the culture of that too. And then I think it's like been embedded in me, where I'm like, well, maybe that's what it is for myself to, be more loved or cared about. That was pretty horrible. Yeah. I think women going a lot of like self-shame with their body. I see that to navigate love for themselves.
I with my girlfriend Emily, I mean, I think that she's stunningly beautiful, has an amazingly beautiful body, and getting the insight into her experiences. She loves her body too, and also she has this like demon that I think a lot of women and men too have. These different perspectives that she sees certain things that aren't perfect in the way that she would like it to be perfect. And it's cool with her because we can have those conversations. She doesn't get consumed by the part all the time. She's aware of the part and can tell me about how the part is seeing her, just through a curious lens. But it's very difficult to see the way that women have internalized narratives about what they're supposed to look like in order to access a certain amount of love. And I think it's especially true for women who the rest of the world would say, oh no, she's beautiful. She shouldn't feel any of those things about her. You probably have the experience of then there's extra guilt because you shouldn't be thinking this thing about yourself because so many people do find you attractive.
Yeah. I also think changing our appearance is something with it, like seeking the attention as well. Like we change the things. It's like, okay, this is the validation I need because I'm being seen. And it's nothing about yourself, really. There's like, who cares about adding all this stuff? But we do things or change. We go to a place where we're changing ourselves so much just to get the eyes or get the attention. But there's something like deeper that's going on, why we feel like we need to do that.
Yeah. But I mean, inevitably, we all change things about ourselves. What's your perspective on that? Do you think that, you know, let's just say, so I'll give you an example. I've had a nose job, and the reason I had this nose job is because I had brain surgery back in 2010. Prior to that point in time, I never hated my nose. It was like nothing that I disliked about it at all. What I later found out is my nose was actually broken, and it started to separate over the years. So this nose job was actually required because I couldn't breathe. But I would be lying if I said that I didn't become insecure about my nose getting wider. And so when I went and got that fixed, not only could I breathe better, but the side effect was that I no longer hated my nose and I no longer thought about it. What is your thought process on people changing themselves to feel better about something that they were once insecure about?
I love that question. I think that a lot of the personal development, spirituality world would say that that's like egoic or immature to want to change something or to be invested in your physical appearance. To me personally, I think that that perspective is I'll call it a lesser perspective. I think there's a version of creating your physical experience and your physical appearance where you are inspired to create. You're clear on your version of beauty and you are inspired to bring that vision of beauty into three-dimensional reality. Now, I do think there's a version of it where people change their appearance without awareness of what they hope happens as a result of changing their appearance. So I am filled with shame and fear right now. It seems like the prescription to get something I'm not even aware of is to get this thing done to my body, but I don't even know what I hope happens as a result. Whereas if a person is like, okay, I am infinitely and abundantly experiencing love and inspiration, and I'm inspired by this particular aesthetic or what this might look like, and I want to bring that image to life, and in the process of bringing that image to life, I'm experiencing joy and love and inspiration. Not that joy and love and inspiration are good, but I just think that person is aware of what they actually want. I think most of the time with physical appearance, people's awareness is on the physical appearance when that is part of what's happening, but maybe what more of what's happening is the internal experience they're hoping to have as a result of the external looking a particular way. So if I want something about my physical appearance to change and I say, yeah, if I look this way, like I will experience more joy, but I'm also holding myself responsible to amplifying joy in my entire life, and every decision that I make is an attempt at amplifying joy, then that becomes a process where I get to learn about joy. Whereas if it's coming from a place of fear and lack of awareness of what I hope will happen as a result of the change, that's not bad, because I don't think anything is bad or good, but I would say that there's an opportunity to increase awareness for that person. And that person would probably find a lot more satisfaction and fulfillment in life if they were to practice more of an awareness of the levels of things that are happening, the internal and the external.
What a brilliant response.
Yeah.
I'm just taking that all in. I'd never looked at it from that perspective, but I mean, that makes total sense to me.
It's so interesting that we've developed a culture that shames people for wanting to be attractive and look a certain way. It's very interesting to me that we do that, because if people were to own their truth, I don't know a single person who doesn't want to be hot.
I agree.
I don't know a
We talk about
single
this all the
person.
time.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard because we think about it, like, and yeah, let's be honest. Like, I think one of the aims in life, not everybody, is like to meet a partner. Like, you know, this is a joke with the father of my child. He's just like, oh, he had a great personality when you met. No, the first thing he saw was my looks. He's not going to be like, of course he wants to get to know me, but part of that in life, you're going to be seen for your looks first of all. So there is an aim, I think, culturally, right, to be kind of like,
Put your best foot forward.
forward to get, you know, to look and feel. I feel like the idea is maybe like feeling your best.
Yes.
There's a difference.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Are you chasing cultural beauty standards, hoping that if you capture them, then you'll be fulfilled?
That will make me worthy.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? And that's probably the thing that people reject is people like chasing those beauty standards. But I think it is a very fulfilling and satisfying thing for each individual to say, this is my vision of beauty. This is my vision of attractiveness. This is what I like. I'm owning my preferences, and I want to bring those preferences to life. That, to me, is the most beautiful thing. If every single person in the world were operating that way, where they felt empowered to bring their vision of beauty to life, no matter what it was, I don't think that we would have any shaming of anyone else's version or expression of beauty. I think the shame, if everyone wants to be hot, I think the shaming of other people pursuing or like valuing how they look comes from people who do not perceive themselves as empowered to bring to life the vision that they have of what they would like to look like. So rather than shaming them, I think the opportunity is to be curious towards them and to create spaces where people who might shame other people for wanting to look a certain way get to speak about how they want to look and what their relationship is with wanting to look a certain way.
My dad always said this is beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. Because some people are going to look at you and not be like, you're beautiful, Shanina. It's about how you perceive yourself and don't take the shame of other people. Like, feeling that way is just how it is. But, yeah, no, I've seen in my industry girls or just women around me do some crazy things, not for themselves, but to, you know, kind of validate the outside world of what's, you know, and what society kind of wants as well.
Like what?
Just changing their image, like how they look. And I know girls that like changing their body because culturally or society, it's like, you know, the BBL, what is it? Is it BBL? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like a lot of women doing it because it's like, okay, this is what men want. And a lot of, well, why are we doing it for what men want? Why can't, you know, do it for you. If you feel good about yourself, do it for you, how you feel confident. Do it for yourself. And I've seen that. And then I've seen the shame side of it where they're overthinking it. It was like, this is not me, who I am.
Yeah.
There's something else to it.
What you just said is personal for me because I made a very stupid decision when I was 19 years old to get breast implants. And I very much made that decision based on the validation I thought I would get from other people. It wasn't even an insecurity for me. I didn't hate my old boobs. I quite liked, you know, they were little, cute, perky. They were 19 years old, you know, like, but I went and quite literally butchered myself because the surgeon at the time cut a pretty major nerve, so I've got no feeling in one of them, and I've had to have 2 more surgeries since then, and I've had capsulation, and I've got lumps everywhere, and that kind of thing. And I've created a real problem for myself based on wanting validation from other people.
Yeah.
So
I think it's so important to understand that whether it's breast implants, whatever it is, everyone is doing that. There's not a single person that you could look at and find that person is entirely void of wanting to present to the world in a particular way that they think is going to get them to be validated. Some people are bolder in their choices to be validated. Like maybe it's a bolder choice to get breast implants. It like draws more attention, right? It's just bolder. But someone who's not being bold is actually also operating with presenting to the world in the way that they think is going to get them to belong because they want to belong to the groups of people who reject boldness or something like that, or reject women who get breast implants. So it's so important to see that every single person is seeking love, safety, and belonging and just mostly making mistakes and not actually asking myself, what's the experience I'm looking to have, and is this the best option to have that experience? That's why for me, like, if someone wants to get the most massive breast implants that has ever existed in the entire world, and that person is like,
don't.
That's fun. Well, like, you know, don't. Yeah. I just from my perspective, I could see that there may be health implications, but from my perspective, all I'm curious about is, what are you hoping, what's the internal experience you want to have walking in the world like that, like, and they're like, I want to experience an immense amount of confidence and joy, and I'm truly seeing this as the best option to access that. Like, this is who I want to be. I'm like, okay, amazing. How do we make it happen? Let's go.
Yeah.
That's, for me personally, all I care about is what does a person want internally, and what are the options available to them to be able to create something externally that is matched with an internal experience.
So perhaps rather than judging people for making those choices, we should stop for a moment and consider why they're making that choice.
What did you want? What did you want? What's this experience like for you? Is it generating the experience that you hoped it would? Like, there's so much beauty to learn. Have you ever seen the documentary My Octopus Teacher?
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so you know when
Had a
he's
really
like,
hard time with calamari after that, to be honest.
it's impossible. Like, it's impossible. It's a no. It's a no. So
Yeah.
you know how he's in that like underwater forest, and he's like, I'm going to this same place every day, but I'm seeing new universes every single day. You know, I'm seeing new worlds every day when I'm in this same world. That's because he's in love with being in that world. And if a person chooses to become a person who adores life and is eager to love the world, then with every single individual person, there is universes to explore. Why did you get these massive breast implants? Like, what is the experience like? Is it creating the experience you wanted? There's so much to learn, but when we judge because we think we're supposed to reject that thing, we cut ourselves off from so much inspiration and joy.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a really, really powerful perspective that, I hope everybody listening, I definitely know for me, I'm going to approach, viewing other people on social media a little bit differently now, or at least I'm going to try to, because inevitably you do, don't you? You're scrolling along and you see someone and you get triggered. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, she's got a fake butt.
Yeah.
She shouldn't have done that.
Yes.
It looks ridiculous.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, we all get judgy. And even if you don't vocalize that, even if you're not the keyboard warrior that sits there and goes, you've got a fat ass, why did you get injections?
Yes.
As a lot of people unfortunately do. You do internally judge, and you might send it to your bestie and go, look at her butt, and,
We all do that.
Yeah.
We all do that. And I just think it's important to recognize, like, it's important, and I'm actually not saying don't do that. What I think is the more satisfying and fulfilling practice is to, when we notice ourselves judging something, to get curious about our internal experience. So just like I'd want to learn, like, what's this feel like? And is it producing the internal result for me that I would want? The same thing that I would be asking this other person outside of me. When I'm judging her in this way, what does that feel like in my body? Do I like that? If I do like that, then I'll continue to judge that person. If I don't like that, then I would experiment with other ways of interpreting this thing or seeing this thing that might produce more of the internal experience that I want.
Isn't that like bullying? And in the experience of bullies pick on people because they see something that they don't have within themselves. I think my mom, I was bullied in school, and my mom was like, it's because you're really nice and you're pretty and you have a lot of great things going for you, and
people are jealous.
And jealous as well. And as a kid growing up, I'm like, jealousy? What is jealousy? Why do they get jealous? Like, I'm just being a kid. But it's kind of like people will pick on you because something is not validated within themselves, or they do want it. Is that what it is exactly?
It is true that when a person is experiencing frustration and stress, and they perceive themselves as disempowered to change it and to create something different, it is a stress relief to hit something or to hurt something.
Is that why we hit share?
Yeah, it is. It is true.
Like expression.
It's right. It relieves stress to hurt something.
Yeah.
So when a kid is bullying another kid, what is most often happening is that they're experiencing an immense amount of fear and anxiety, and they haven't yet developed the capacity to even be aware of what's happening internally, and they don't yet perceive themselves as capable of and competent to transforming that internal experience. So the way that I always see it is that people who are empowered construct and build. People who are disempowered destruct and break things apart. And what I think, for me personally, I think that the empowered thing to do is, rather than to shame bullies or shame people who destruct, to ask ourselves, like, okay, what does this person need in order to experience themselves as empowered? Because when people experience themselves as empowered, when you're experiencing love, you know that the only way to get more love is to support other people getting to experience love and joy too. So people who are empowered empower other people. So that's how I see bullying dynamics.
Because more often than not, if you really deep dive into the bully's home life or something, you might discover that they're having a horrible time at home, mum and dad are getting a divorce, they're being abused, or they were bullied themselves, which has made them become the bully.
Yes. And, I would say, I don't know that many people who had a home life that was like, wow, the research would suggest that that's an incredible home life.
Me either.
Most people I know had turbulent, chaotic home lives in some way. I think the bullies, actually in an interesting way, there's something about bullies where they are taking their adversity and fighting. They're fighting for something, and they're not doing it in a way that's building their own self-esteem. It's not the best approach, but it is this little kid trying to navigate adversity in the best possible way that they know how. And I actually have the perspective of well, at least they're trying something. I really don't like that it's harming other people. But this is a little kid who's trying to do something, to change something. It's just not working very well.
I would love your take on something that I saw online recently, which was this guy, his name escapes me, but he's supposed to fight Logan Paul. And he has taken to not just attacking Logan Paul online, as quite often these fighters do before they go into the ring. He is attacking Logan Paul's fiance, Nina Agdal, and he is saying some pretty horrific stuff about her, which, as a woman, he's basically slut-shaming her and making out that she's some sort of horrible person for, God forbid, having dated other men. And
but also wanting sex in the video. She's just pretty much being very...
She posted a funny video.
It is hilarious.
It's
For me,
so
it's
funny.
funny.
Yes, I like it.
I'm sorry, it actually made me like her more, seeing that video.
Me too. It's amazing.
I think it's funny.
Yeah, where she was just talking about, wanting sex. And that he shared that video in a negative way, and that video is receiving a lot of attention, and she's getting bullied as a result. So I guess my question is, what is your perspective on somebody like him?
Yeah.
So I think that's an amazing question. Let's all come up with a shared result that we would want to produce. So we're seeing a problem.
Yeah.
We're now having a conversation about how do we address this problem? How do we come up with a solution? So what do we think is the result that if we had a high level of influence here, what result would we want to produce through the process of addressing this problem?
Right.
Well, I know what he's trying to achieve as a result. He's trying to...
Attention,
right? But also just make that other person feel bad and feel anger and sadness and hurt them. He's the aggressor where he's trying to do that.
Yeah, if I were Logan Paul, I'd probably want to punch him in the nose about now.
Which is exactly what he wants.
He's trying to do, because he's trying to build up something to create a fight as well. So what can I do to get really down and dirty and hurt you? And this is what I'm trying to create.
Yep.
Poor Nina. What's she done?
Yeah, she's a victim in this case. Yeah.
But what can he do? I think the better result is for him to step up and kind of be take the power away from the situation a little bit and be just supportive for Nina at the end of the day. If it was up to me, I wouldn't fight. I would you're just trying to create something, and I'm not going to give you that energy that you're trying to create. Because
he's producing attack energy and wants attack energy back. That's going to amplify the thing he's creating.
So I guess the question is how you were saying before, use what is a tactic of love to create a different result.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
You passed. A+.
So okay, but it's there. in that example, it's funny that you say pass, but there's no right or wrong, because like, if the result you wanted was more fear and anger, then that would inform the way that we approached that dude, whatever his name is. I hadn't even heard about him before.
I don't know it either.
Right. So, but what you just said is that what you want is to experiment with approaching this in a loving way. You think that that's the result that you want, which is what I would want too.
I just feel like someone that's trying to hurt me, my choice will be what's going to make me feel good. I don't feel good about this. There is a way that they're trying to create that with me, and obviously it's working. I think the validation is going to be upset and hurt and be angry.
Right.
But I don't.
Logan or Nina or both?
Nina and everybody, like, they're hurt. But what can
The people who are being attacked as a unit.
Yes.
Yeah.
What can I do that's different? Because choosing, I think for me, and like you said, some people choose the violent, angry. It's like choosing the violent, angry thing is going to create more drama, more hurt, more things being said. Then Nina's going to be upset because then they're hurt. And, I know Nina personally, and yeah, this hurts me. She's a great character, and she's kind of like, whatever. Like, so cool. I hope that she's taking it that way. She's really just free, like spirited.
I love that.
She seems like so much fun.
She is. But that would be my tactic of like, where we don't even think it's the choice sometimes because we're kind of like reacting off with the hurt and the anger. So choosing the love aspect is like, let me try and take that power away.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of the approach of no response is the best response in a situation like this?
I think that could work. If I were in the position of Logan or Nina, that's what his fiance's name is?
Yeah.
Nina, yep.
What I would be asking myself is, what is the experience I want to be having here?
Which is hard when you're being attacked.
It is.
Ooh,
It is. But just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not possible.
Right.
Like Novak Djokovic, the guy who's won the most tennis championships of all time, he's someone. The reason he's won so much is because when intensity increases, he becomes more present. He becomes more present, and that's why he's able to beat other people, because when he's more present and calm and centered, he's able to be more creative, he's able to move faster, he's able to see options for himself. Whereas when we lose ourselves in the intensity, we don't see options anymore. We react and act unconsciously. And what most people would probably do in this instance, they would go to their protection responses, which is to freeze up or to hide away from it, which is totally understandable, or to try and fight it. Personally, what I would do is ask myself, what's the experience I want to be having here? I want an experience of empowerment and confidence. So, okay, let's say I had every option available to me. This is what I would do. And this is probably not as Logan. Let's say this were just me and I got to do this. Yeah. I would ask to meet with the guy, and I would be curious and ask him what he hopes happens here. Like, what is his grand vision of this? What's his master plan? And actually be sincerely curious to learn about what he's trying to do here. And he might say, well, if I'm going to be honest with you, I'm being inflammatory in this way and doing this and this and this, and then there's going to be the fight's going to be promoted and I'll make a lot of money from it, okay? And okay, so you want money, that's one of the things you want. What else do you want? Well, then I get recognition and attention and notoriety. Okay, so you also want status and recognition, okay? You want money and status here, two things that most people in the world want.
Right.
You might be operating with an understanding that your best option for accessing money and status is to create fear and chaos. But if you got the money and the status that you wanted, what would happen? What would that do for you? And maybe he'd be like, well, I'd be so fucking confident or whatever. If we continued to ask questions, I bet, and it may take a long time with him, I bet he has resistance and stubbornness, but I would bet my life that we'd end up at the place that what he wants is relaxation and groundedness and calm and peace. We're just seeing a person who's operating so unconsciously. He's so far away from being the thing that he actually wants. And then he's doing this thing which is hurtful, and it's also working in some ways. So like, I don't want anyone to get hurt, but I would also acknowledge that what you're doing is working. It just may not be producing the results that you actually want. Like, what if you lived the rest of your life trusting that you could make even more money and have even more status if you were loving and kind to people? And he may not yet know that. I bet he doesn't know that. And I bet he has no idea who he is when he's showing up in the world in a confident and loving way. And that to me is sad. I would want to find those parts of him and help him relate to those parts and support him in his empowerment. That's the thing that I think would actually change things.
Wow. I think that's, and what you're saying is for everybody, do you think it's right for everyone to make choices when they're in a calmer state, not on the reaction of someone else, and in a place of neutral zone? Because I feel like a lot of us, when we get hurt or whatever, like we're reacting off and we're making choices off like, when people like say sleep on it, is that a way? Is that
what
what
this
you're
guy's
saying?
banking on?
Yeah.
That's what he's banking on,
Yeah.
is to amplify this fear and anger and violence with more. That's what he's banking on, is people not consciously choosing actually, because the thing about it is like, what happens in these kinds of situations is that if I'm reacting to him unconsciously and I'm like, that is so not okay, like what he says about women, I'm doing that thing where I'm presenting an identity that I think I'm supposed to present as like having certain opinions, fighting him. I'm probably operating in that way. Whereas if I were to take a second and say, no, the result I want this dude, whatever his name is, to be kind and love this woman, the best chance of making that happen would be for me to be kind and to love him. That to me is the thing that's most likely to produce the result that we want. So then it's my responsibility to see all the shit that comes up in me, all the conditioning, all the programming that tells me to not be kind and loving towards him and not invest in those parts of me, but instead choose to be this other thing that's aligned with the result that I would like to produce and I think we would like to produce here.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for Nina Agdal in this situation? She's done nothing except just be engaged to Logan Paul. And she's sitting there and just having all this shit thrown at her. And she must be feeling horrible. It's impossible not to, no matter how much you're used to being in the public eye, no matter how much of a thick skin you have. She must be feeling this in a big way. What advice would you have for her to not take it personally, to process this?
If I were in a relationship with her and I like had intimate access to influence her choices and support and to help with this, I would probably try and organize a conversation with him. And I would ask her how she wants to navigate this. Like if there were no limitations, if any option in the whole world were available to her, what is her most ideal version of navigating this? Let me actually erase the conversation part. That's what I would start with. What is your vision of like, what is the most confident, powerful, loving, badass way of navigating this? Tell me about that vision. Tell me about that person who navigates it that way. Now, who is that person? How do they feel? What do they do? What's their internal experience? Okay, now we've got this vision. This is the same thing with like breast implants. We've got this vision of this thing we want to bring into three-dimensional reality. Now, how can I support you in bringing that exact vision to life? That's what I would do. I don't think there's a prescription for the right thing to do. I'd be more curious about what her grand vision is of who she wants to be. If she looks back on this on her deathbed and she was like, that was the most confident thing I could have possibly done, what would that be? And then we work together to help her bring that thing to life.
It's going to be interesting to see how they handle it. But I really hope that they are able to come to a similar conclusion to that on their own and actually navigate this like that.
Me too.
I really hope for the best. I think, that needs to change, the slut shaming in this world, definitely. I'm so over it.
Absolutely.
I wanted to talk about, we're just talking about Nina and all that and like the response and like supporting partners. To me, you're an expert in relationships.
Shanina's brain went exactly where mine did because you have an amazing relationship.
Thank you.
You have a beautiful relationship, but expert in relationship advice. And for me, one of the first questions I was saying, like, you can't love somebody unless you love yourself first. So what do you think is the first steps for somebody that wants to be in a committed, loving relationship? If they're like, well, this is what I want, but sometimes I think people don't realize that maybe they're not ready. What are the first steps?
Okay, so
I'm getting out the pen and paper for this
okay,
one.
Okay, so here's some of the elements that I think are really important. When we say love ourselves, what I think that actually means is having our internal experience as the highest on our priority list. What a lot of people do is invest their energy and attention into other people's experiences, hoping that this perception of me will give me this thing, or this validation will give me this thing.
Guilty.
We all do that.
Yeah.
We all do that,
Yeah.
right? But the person who says, what I am going to do is live the rest of my life paying attention to how I actually feel and making that my number one priority, that I think is an essential ingredient. Now, an important part of that is when you do that and you say, like, I'm going to feel good, I'm going to feel loving, I'm going to feel joyful, and I'm going to hold myself highly accountable and personally responsible for actually feeling those ways, then that person has to be very clear and honest and discerning about every single pattern in their life. So so some people make everything about everyone else, some people make everything about them. If a person is paying attention to their internal experience and they're a person who makes everything about them, they will know, oh, I'm not actually experiencing as much joy and love as I would like. If I were to make this about what they want and what I want, then that amplifies my internal experience of joy in the amount that I want. That makes sense? So Number one thing is prioritization of the internal experience and knowing that your internal experience and what you feel is your highest authority. There is nothing outside of you that can tell you so here's a trap that people fall into. Well, they did this thing and I'm putting all these pieces together. I'm kind of being anxious and super analytical and I'm coming up with all these reasons to explain why what they're doing is wrong. All of that, rather than saying, that doesn't feel good, I don't like that.
Yeah.
That's it. That is what I mean when I say your internal experience is your highest authority. You either like it or you don't.
And it's that simple.
It's so
It
simple.
is that simple.
Because I do this. So, whereas it's a different result, like why they're right, to make it be like, they did this to, like, you know, to come over, and then they like
you justify it.
You justify it just to be right, and then rather than just being like, did I like it or I didn't like it?
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yes.
So is that easy?
Yes, and here's the thing about what you like and what you dislike. It'll evolve over time. But think about this, a client of mine gave me the perfect analogy the other day. It's like, it's so good, I can't even believe it. So imagine you're drinking a cup of coffee and you take a sip and it's really hot. And for some reason, this is a coffee that never changes temperature. So you have to drink this coffee and you know every single sip that you take is gonna be hot. You would be like terrified of that experience because you don't trust that it's going to change.
It's enough to break my caffeine
Right,
addiction.
right, yeah, that would be enough to break your chat. Exactly, right? Now, think about being in a relationship with a person. They do something, you don't like it, but you don't think that you not liking it is enough of a reason to say anything. So then they continue with that pattern over and over and over again. You're drinking hot coffee without doing what's required in order to change the temperature of the coffee. And what's required to create change in a relationship is both people fully owning their internal experience and saying, I don't like this, I do like this, and coming together and using their likes and their dislikes as necessary information for them to both co-create solutions that help both of them become more of who they want to be. So something with like not liking and disliking, I'll go to Emily and I'll be like, listen, I'm noticing this pattern. I don't like it. And here's the narrative that I'm experiencing. I'm judging you. This is what I'm saying in my head, and I'm feeling frustration when this thing is happening. I don't want that. I don't want that experience. I want to be loving, and I've tried all these things to try and change it, and I haven't been able to change it. So now I want to bring this to you so we can work on this together. Now, when she and I are super clear on what our priorities are, which is the amplification of joy. So if one of us is experiencing frustration in the relationship, it's not about it being right or wrong. It's just that's not what we say we want. So then it's our problem, and we come together to work on that thing. So I say, here's what's happening in my mind. Here's the experience I'm having. I don't like it. What's your experience of this thing? Is this problem that I'm seeing, is that problem aligned with your highest vision of yourself? Or am I right here? Am I frustrated because this problem is not aligned with your highest vision of yourself? And if she were to say, you're so totally right, you're correct, that is not who I want to be, this is who I want to be, when I'm this person, then I'll be experiencing more joy, I'll like this better. Then the conversation becomes, okay, now who do we both need to be and what do we need to do in order to bring that solution to life? It becomes very creative. Another version of it is she says, no, this is exactly who I want to be. I don't want to change anything about this. So then the frustration is mine to deal with. I can change my expectations. Okay, maybe there will be some frustration in this relationship. I can't force her to change anything. All I can do is support her into becoming who she wants to be. So I'm either frustrated and I accept that, I accept this thing about her, which is difficult to do, or I leave the relationship.
Right.
But to me, it all has to come from two people who are very clear on how they want to feel internally and who hold themselves to a standard of feeling nothing less than that internally and are investing into another person who they know they can co-create with to make those feelings even bigger and more satisfying.
Oh, wow.
So step one is ask yourself how you feel or how you want to feel.
Yes, and know that that is your highest authority. Not feeling good, feeling good. There's no higher authority outside of you that can say with more authority that that's correct or incorrect. You never have to explain it, but it is super valuable to not have it be the end all be all, but to just use it as information to then work with this other person to create something new together, something that you both like.
Do you think it's important for so when you're in the relationship, you're in there and having that person, communication is really important. I'll give you an example. I have abandonment issues because of my childhood. My mom and dad got divorced and my dad left. And so I didn't realize I was attracting situations in my relationship and was probably wasn't even ready to be in a relationship because I was just trying to, the abandonment is being is being by not being okay being by myself. So I was bringing people in to all right, you're going to be here. I feel good now, but then.
But you didn't feel safe.
No, because they have to live their life, right? They have to do things. They can't be on their phone all the time, and I'm not expecting it all the time, but do you think it's really important to have that relationship of communication, having someone? I don't feel like a lot of people talk about the communication of feelings.
Yes.
They just think it's we'll talk.
Yes.
But that's it. It's about feelings, isn't it?
It's about the internal experience, 100%. Because what people do is they talk about the external things when the thing that they're actually motivated by is the internal experience. Everything is motivated by internal experience. And you just cut out so much noise and so much excess when you get straight to the internal experience. And if you're both on the same page, and this is what I think is so beautiful, if you have two people coming together who are coming together and saying, I want to build a life of joy, zest, exuberance, awe, wonder, kindness, warmth, curiosity. These are the things that I want, the internal experiences I want to have. This other person says, yes, that's exactly what I want too. And you're like, okay, what is your version of that? What does zest, exuberance, love, joy look like in your life? They're I'm making this much money, I'm doing these things, I'm traveling this place, I'm doing all these things. These are just the external solutions. I'm not attached to those specific things. What I am invested in is my internal experience, and I'm not attached to the external solutions for it, right? So two people coming together who are very clear on the internal experiences that they want to have, that makes conversation and communication so easy, because then when a person comes to the other and says, hey, I'm noticing this thing and I'm feeling anxious as a result. It's not about like who's right, who's wrong, how to text the right way, how to speak the right way, any of those things. It's like, okay, that's not the thing that we want together. How can we massage this and work on this together to transform the anxiety to something else? So yes, communication, but you just you make things so much less confusing and cut out so much noise when it's about internal experience.
I mean, you would think this would be obvious, and yet I feel like I've run every relationship I've been in, which has inevitably made me gun shy of relationships, to be honest. The other way, which is, I'll give you an example. I was in a relationship where my boyfriend at the time followed just about every single Instagram model, that's probably ever existed on social media.
Great example.
Great example.
Yeah, that's probably ever existed. Yeah. And initially I pretended that I didn't care because I didn't want to seem jealous. And didn't say anything for a while. And then after a while, I noticed it was just more and more Instagram models. And then I would sort of like be sneakily looking over his shoulder when he's on his Instagram, and I would see fire signs and, all that stuff. And so eventually it got to a point where I said, hey, I don't like this. It doesn't make me feel good. Mm-hmm. I was immediately met with, you're jealous, you're crazy, just for expressing something that now, I would have just probably turned on my heel and walked out the door. But back then, we lived together. I was serious about this person. So what advice would you have for somebody who's met with that kind of resistance or gaslighting?
I really meant that. It's a great example. It's so good. There's so many pieces in here to work with. So you're noticing, he's following 31 more people today. Let me go take a look at that. Every single one is hot Instagram girl. Okay, interesting. I don't like that. I'm not comfortable with that. The next day it happens a week later. You're noticing a pattern. You don't like the pattern. So you not liking the pattern is essential, right? And I love that you brought that to him and communicated that. Now, not liking how it feels is entirely enough. And it's also valuable to be curious about what don't you like? You don't like the feeling, but what don't you like about this? And maybe, and you let me know if this is how it was, like the idea of a guy who's a grown man who's using his time that way is just not attractive to you. Maybe that's what it is, right?
100%. I found it, well, first of all, it made me feel like I wasn't enough for him. I also felt really embarrassed because I was like, what is he doing following all these girls? Like, he's in an openly committed relationship.
Yes.
This looks bad on me.
I don't love that happened and you experienced that, but I love those two categories of, I don't like this. This creates anxiety. This is not what I want. And also this is embarrassing. Like, that's not how I want to represent myself to the world, is being with a man who's doing that. I like those two things a lot. That's like vision of what you're attracted to, who you want to be in a relationship with, and its internal experience. Both are valuable. Now, let's say the best version of this, right? The most ideal version. You go to him, you say, hey, I've been noticing you're following 150 new people, 90% of them are Instagram models. What's that like for you? And the thing that's most important to learn about is that who you want to be? Do you want to be a person who 50% of who you follow are Instagram models? If he says, and remember, this is in the ideal form, but this is possible to have it be like this. If he says, yes, that's exactly who I want to be. I want to be a guy who's got 200,000 followers, I'm following 1,000 people, and I want 500 of them to be Instagram models. There's nothing to do. That's who he says he wants to be. Right. And then you go back to those options, or either you adjust your expectations and you accept it, or you say, okay, well, that's not aligned with what I want, and you divest your energy from that. But the most important thing, because what happens is people get defensive when you say this is bad. It's not that following Instagram models is bad. The more interesting thing, and the thing you can really work with, is who do you want to be? What is your ideal version of yourself? who is that person? How do they navigate the world? Who are they following on Instagram? If following those accounts is part of your ideal vision, that's okay. I love you. You're letting me know who you are. I appreciate you, but that's not what I want. That doesn't align with my vision. Now, if you were to be like, fuck yeah, I know. I've been doing it more and more. My For You page is showing me all of these hot girls. Like, I'm clicking on them. I'm like wanting to DM them. I'm following them. Like, I don't want to do this. This is not who I want to be, but it's what is happening. Then you can be like, okay, tell me about it. Like, what's that like to feel powerless to you're doing this thing that you don't want to do. And maybe you do in part want to do, but you don't want to do it. You know, It's like, and then he says like, well, I'm feeling a lot of shame. I'm like chasing dopamine. I'm not getting work done. I'm doing all this stuff. I'm like masturbating more, like, all this stuff. But that is not who I want to be. Well, who do you want to be? Like, how do you want to use Instagram? What's that vision for you? I'm not following any. I'm friends with these 10 women who are Instagram models, so I like following them because
that was the line I used to get. They're all my friends.
Right.
But,
You're jealous.
But like,
Crazy.
all like that's all defensiveness, and people do that. People are so quick to defend because barely anyone is ever given the space where someone approaches them, non-attached to the outcome, just lovingly and being like, hey, here's this pattern. Is this pattern aligned with who you want to be? No one gets that. Everyone gets criticism and judgments, and people need them to change. So their immediate reaction is to defend. So
it's also a control response. It's you trying to control the other person.
And that is you trying to control something externally because you haven't yet taken ownership of prioritizing your internal experience. So when you do that, when you say my whole life is going to be about investing in what works and what makes me feel good, and I'm going to transform or release what doesn't, when you know that, you have no reason to control anything about him. He can be who he is, do what he does. You're going to find joy somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that's all good. So, yes.
Is it part of the defense, though, is because they're lying?
Yeah. What if they're gaslighting?
Yeah, what if they're gaslighting, being narcissistic, and just also being like, there's a chance it could be cheating. Like, that's why people go in the defense. Like, there's something external, like there's something else going on where they're controlling the situation rather than talking about it's not about who they are.
Yes.
It's about what they're doing.
Yes. So
what's your top piece of advice for dealing with a gaslighting narcissist?
All right.
And cheater.
Not pointing the finger.
I've been thinking a lot. So one thing that's important to know about narcissism is that it is a diagnosis of narcissism is one of the least common diagnoses in mental health.
And yet everyone is one.
So it's important to understand that either physicians and therapists are misdiagnosing people, they're getting it wrong, or people are wrong about labeling people narcissists. I just think that's important to understand. I think the tendency is to be external and label someone a narcissist as a way of avoiding the ownership of that internal experience and the prioritization of self. And I've actually been in that pattern myself. In like business relationships with sports coaches, like narcissistic older men kind of have a strange pattern of this who like want something from me and I want something from them, and it like makes me feel icky and gross, but I'm bypassing the icky feeling because I want something from them. I'll continue to try and get that thing from them. So when I own my internal experience, it's much harder to get caught up in the dynamics of what might be narcissism or gaslighting. Another thing to keep in mind is that I've been thinking about this recently. What is often gaslighting is actually a massive lack of awareness. What we see as gaslighting, and it is gaslighting, and it's also this person who's just lacking in awareness. And sometimes when you're a really aware person, women tend to be more aware than men do, like about social dynamics and emotions, all that stuff.
I think we're more invested in it.
Yes, you pay more attention to it. You're more accurate with it. You understand people's internal experiences better than men tend to. So when you are super aware of things and this other person is showing you evidence that they're not as aware as you are, it's very hard to imagine what it would be like to live life with a very reduced awareness. It's really hard to see the world through that person's eyes. So it comes off like gaslighting, and we want to say like, no, reject that, that's bad. Really the thing that's happening is this person is just demonstrating a smaller awareness than you have. And the question is am I going to continue to invest my attention and energy into a person whose level of awareness does not satisfy me? And if I don't make the commitment to saying, I'm going to live my life like attracting and being attracted to and meeting people who match me in my level of awareness, then that change will never happen. It has to be from the individual choosing that.
If the person isn't willing to co-create the relationship you want, you're settling, right?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on what you want.
Yeah.
If you want a life of frustration and disempowerment, then a person who's not co-creating is the exact right person for you. And I really do mean that sincerely, because I think it's important to have that energy of giving people permission to have frustration and fear and shame and disempowerment if they want to. Because I don't want anyone to have to defend their choices of shame and disempowerment. However, of course, no one wants shame and disempowerment. Everyone wants fulfillment and joy.
Right.
So if you want fulfillment and joy, then investing in a person who is showing you evidence that they are not able to co-create in a satisfying way is not a wise investment.
Yeah, I think a lot of people also stay, and me as well, like we stay hoping that the person will change because they
You
love
fall
that
in love with potential.
potential. That's, yeah, like...
Is
but
potential real?
Yeah, is potential real? Can it happen though? Can you actually fall in love with the person when you're thinking like, I can grow with them, or they can I see the light a little bit, or is that just make believe?
Okay, I notice a really interesting pattern with my clients who are women. I've seen this in a few of them, like highly capable, powerful, successful, entrepreneurial women who are beautiful. That's this particular archetype I'm thinking of. Find themselves in relationships with men who they want to help this man actualize his potential. Interesting like mother dynamics there, like developing this other being, bringing this other being into their potential. And they're also operating with this sense of, well, I've already put this amount of work into the relationship. I don't want to leave it in case he becomes who I see him as capable of being, and someone else gets the prize.
Yes, I've heard of this before. I've seen that because
You've heard of it before. You've lived it before.
No, I'm gonna. No, not every ex has been doing great after me. But you know, I see that. Like you see, like why I put the effort into a relationship, and what if someone else gets the best of?
You're training them.
Not even the training, like what I wanted to see for my life. Because if be honest, like and we talk about this, is like you fell in love with that person because there is some beautiful traits about them. There's something so great, and that you can like, oh, I really want to stick it out. There's so many amazing things about them.
I actually hope I trained all my exes for the next girl.
I like that.
I really do. I would not, some of the situations I've been in, I would never wish that on another woman.
Yeah.
And I really hope they grew and you know, got better as a person and became more aware, and that they never treat the next girl like they treated me.
I think that's a very
Absolutely.
powerful perspective to have.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think a lot of women struggle with that. What are some things that men struggle with in a relationship?
Okay, great question, and something that doesn't often go spoken about. You actually might know better than I know, because I think what happens, what the pattern that I notice, I'm curious if you both see this. Men, we all do this. Men might be particularly vulnerable to this, is really, really clinging on to this idea that presenting as a particular persona to the world is going to get them the things that they want. And that persona requires the repression of so much fear and insecurity. And then in their relationships with women, they project all of that fear and insecurity explodes. And within their relationship with a woman, there are one version of themselves that they would never allow the rest of the world to see. I think men are tend to be, maybe more so than women, but maybe not, terrified of exposure into their internal world and having the world see the truths of what they're actually afraid of, what they're actually insecure about. They haven't yet learned that exposure and the raw truth of who they are is actually their most powerful thing. They're hoping that the presentation of masculinity, the performance of masculinity, is going to give them the power that they're looking for. That's what I see a lot of men struggle with. And then in relationships, they end up, all of that fear explodes and gets projected onto whoever they're in a relationship with.
When really, as women, I mean, I think from my perspective at least, we don't really care about all that. Like, okay, initially when you're attracted to someone, you might be like, you know, he's a baller, he's like got a cool job and drives a nice car and he's attractive and whatever. But all that goes out the window pretty quickly if you know, you're not getting enough attention, if they're prioritizing their work above the relationship, if they're not seemingly, you know, they don't really care about how you feel in different situations. I mean, at the end of the day, everything else goes away really quickly and you're like, damn, like all this other stuff was cool, but I really just want a guy to hold me at night and to love me. And
Pillow talk.
Yeah.
Sharing feelings. I think what I've seen and what I would like to place in my son's lap is like talking about his feelings and not feeling like less than of a man because he is talking about it. I think there's something really beautiful and empowering about sitting there as a man and be like, this is how I feel and I don't like this or I do like this, rather than putting a mask on to present yourself, because it's like that takes a lot of energy for a man.
It does.
Like I can't imagine doing that every day and putting that and just feeling like you need to do that consistently throughout the years to get what you want. And I guess that's like the shame part where it's like, well, this is working because it's still getting me what I want, but are you happy?
And then there's the other side of men who it takes so much energy to repress that fear and insecurity and to be operating in the world where you think that if your insecurities are seen, then you get rejected and excluded and you don't get access to love and what you're looking for. When what I've learned is that the more that I've owned the truths, the ugliest things about me, the more I belong. Like the more people want to invest in me, the more I own my truth, which is a very interesting thing. And I think that men are hearing that being vulnerable gets them certain things, but aren't being taught how to do it. And what I think men currently think is vulnerability is a lot of emotional dumping and projection. And they haven't yet learned to relate to their ugly truths with confidence and with love. They're hoping that someone outside of them will love them and heal those things for them. And that's what I think men are in this current moment generally thinking vulnerability is. And it's not working, because when they try and do that intimately with women, then women aren't attracted to that, because it's like it's uncontained, chaotic emotional experience, rather than this man sharing a truth about himself that he's sharing it in a grounded, kind, loving way.
Which, as you said, is confident.
Exactly.
And confidence is sexy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I love that.
Well, okay, so we have the relationship, you got the communication, we've seen the red flags, narcissists. So what do you think, in your words, would be like an ideal relationship, something that really works? Like, what is the inspiration for everyone to kind of follow and be like, okay, this is your path. This is what you should get to. What do you think is an ideal relationship?
You have a very inspirational relationship.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I love that you post about it so honestly and authentically on your Instagram, because, I mean, I don't know your lovely partner at all, but I feel like I know a little bit about your relationships.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just launched a podcast, and
Congratulations.
thank you so much. And our first episode we did together.
Amazing.
And we just did our second episode on Saturday, I think.
Can't wait to listen.
And it's been my favorite part about doing it, honestly, is Emily is the mastermind behind the scenes of so many. I mean, I'm very good at what I do, but in terms of the creative direction and understanding the systems, Emily is just absolutely next level.
I love that you're giving her credit.
Oh
too.
my God,
That's
because
awesome.
it is 100% her. And what's been so exciting for me is through the podcast, like people getting to see who she actually is and feel the energy between us and be exposed to the dynamic, because I really do think that it is a special thing. I'll say, like, what I think, some of the pieces that go into what is working so well and what we're both liking so much. For instance, we're about to go to Italy. A month ago, I found out that it's what's likely, we don't know, is that a bag that had my passport was stolen from my car. Which, like, in San Diego, that never happens, but it's also like, it's not surprising that that happened to me. I leave my stuff in my car unlocked all the time. So she was mad at me, right?
Yeah.
She was mad at me, and her approach was very much like, one, I'm not attracted to that. Like, that's not daddy energy to me. And that's not aligned with what I want. I was like, you're right. That's not the daddy energy I want to be either. And I love that you're giving me that feedback. The other thing was,
someone will be like, oh, hell no. And then you go into a fight. It just, that
gonna
takes
be my
a lot of
and that's the thing that I want people to
alignment.
have. Like, I want to be what she's attracted to, because I know her inner world so well. And I know that what she's attracted to is who I want to be.
I love that daddy line. I think I'm going to have to steal that.
Yeah, please steal it. She's like, that's not daddy
so
energy.
good.
And I'm like, you're right, it's not.
Go,
Like,
Emily.
yeah. He's like, I'm immediately going and getting like a fireproof safe and keeping all of my documents in there. Like, I want to be that for you, you know? And we use that all the time. Like, this is not attractive to me, as important information for us to know, you know, whether or not we are being in line with who we want to actually be. So the other thing that she said was like, she was like, I trust you to take care of this. I trust that the passport is going to be there the day that we fly out. Either way, I'm going to Italy. So what I love about her is that with or without me, she is going to be the person that she wants to be. I know with or without me, she's going to spend the rest of her life creating the exact life that she wants. And I do think if I were to die, or the relationship that she had, I think it wouldn't be as good, and she would have to mourn that a little bit. But I do know that she would be happy and confident and joyful and powerful no matter what, with or without me. That, I think, is essential to our relationship, because she also knows that about me. Like, we're two people who are very clear on what we want and how we want to experience life. And it's very clear that investing energy into each other and spending time together makes it easier, faster, and more fun for us to both be who we want to be. So it's in some ways very pragmatically selfish. Like, who do we each want to be? And this relationship and the way we interact with each other is a resource for us to both be who we want to be. But as she and I both become more of who we want to be, because our visions are so aligned, that means that the relationship is this thing that's like better than we could have ever imagined. And so those are, I hope that what came through there are some of the principles or some of the elements that make it work. Those are some of the things that I think are essential to what makes it work in the way that it does.
I feel like from that, it's just allowing the person you're with to be who they're destined to be.
Yes.
Being your authentic, true self. Finding that somebody, like, whatever they want to do, whatever you know, feel like they want to accomplish, you're there supporting it, but then also just being who you want to be, and like, how do we help each other to be the best person of ourselves.
Exactly.
It's like two whole people coming together in a relationship creates a successful environment, or can, if you're aligned. But I feel like a lot of us, at least for me personally, I don't mind admitting, I guess I've operated from a different place in the past, which has been two halves make a whole. You know?
That little, when you say that, it reminds me of the little locket where you have like the flower and you're like, and we're one. Oh.
Yes, it comes together perfectly.
Yeah.
And I was speaking with a client about this recently, speaking about me and Emily, because I'm more of a whole person now than I was when we started our relationship. But I'm still not whole, and I don't think that wholeness exists.
Right.
So what's interesting is, like, at the time when we came together, compared to now, neither of us were whole. We were fragments of who we are now. But at the time, we were both maximizing what was available for us. So it's not that we were complete. It's not that we were healed. It's not like the work was done. We hadn't like reached the top of the mountain. It was that we were both highly committed to maximizing what was available for us in the moment. And then coming together, and the energy in the relationship, the experience of the relationship has transformed both of us. And it's the same thing now. Neither of us are whole, but our version of almost being whole, but not that whole, is just a better version than it used to be. So it grows and it evolves.
You just touched on something interesting that I would love to discuss with you, which is the idea of perfectionism. Because I think that's something that I really, really struggle with. It's like, if it's not perfect, I just avoid it. And what you're basically saying is, you weren't perfect and she wasn't perfect going into this relationship. And you're saying that that doesn't exist and you're never going to get there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So this is how I have two different perspectives on perfectionism or perfection, and they kind of contradict, but I'll share them and we'll see what comes up for you. So on the one hand, I operate with this understanding that right now in this exact moment is perfect. It could not be any other way than exactly as it is. Now, perfect doesn't mean like complete. It just means that it is the perfect expression of what it could possibly be. Like, how could things be any different right now than what they are? Now, in the experience of perfection, there are things that I like and there are things that I would like to be better. So if this right now is what perfection is in this moment, what do I like and what do I want to continue to invest my energy in and to grow and to allow to evolve? And what don't I like? What are the things about this current version of perfection that I would like to be different, or that I would like to grow, or I'd like to change or transform in a new way? That to me is the most empowering perspective on perfection, because it's one that understands that whatever perfection is evolves and grows over time. It's not something to strive for that doesn't exist right now.
So you can sort of use perfection as a barometer.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. So, and also to touch on what you said earlier, approaching the situation from a place of curiosity instead of shame or fear.
Exactly.
Oh, I'm learning.
Yeah.
Exactly. Curiosity
Yeah.
instead of, right? So usually what perfectionism is a socially acceptable or a socially celebrated and encouraged way of experiencing shame and remaining small. Right. So when you're operating with perfectionism, what happens? You just you don't do the things that you want to do. You don't pursue your version of joy. It's a way that shame has taken over and is trying to convince you to remain ashamed and small. Joy doesn't give a fuck about perfection. Joy creates and loves mistakes and loves learning and loves doing some things right and other things wrong, because the things that joy does wrong, it's like, okay, what's the way to integrate this and to do something even better the next time? So when we are operating with perfectionism, it's really valuable to understand that it's a form of self-sabotage. It's a form of avoiding our expansiveness and becoming who we actually want to be.
I don't know about you, but I think it's the biggest thing I struggle with.
Yeah, I think there's something to it where my mom struggles with perfectionism, but it's kind of like, it's never going to be real. It's like obtaining something. No one's actually never perfect. You're not gonna ever meet it, because once you get there, then there's going to be something else that you want to get. It's also like with your goals. You're like, okay, well, I got there. That's the perfect thing that I wanted to achieve. And you get there, then you're going to be like, well, there's something else I want to get. There's something next.
And it doesn't quite feel the way you thought it would feel.
If you would get the thing.
You reach the gold at the end of the rainbow and you're like, oh, it's kind of hard.
It was like finding the
great.
perfect guy.
Yeah.
And you find the perfect guy. You're like, okay, well, I'm here, but there's nothing.
Why aren't I
and you're
happy?
there's a
Yeah.
nitpicking thing where you're like, something has to be wrong, right?
Yep.
Or something has to be a little bit better. Yeah, like, I find perfection in my job. I think I do that a little bit. But
How does it show up there?
feeling like I put all the work into it, like it has to do well, and then if it doesn't go the way I want, like it's just like, well, this is just like,
Might as well not try.
might as well not try. It's never going to be good enough, and I let myself down. Rather than now I can see, like, am I doing this out of joy and happiness? Like, I did my best. Like, this is great. Oh, it was a mistake, but did I have fun by doing it? Like, this is actually what I chose to do. Like, seeing it from a different angle.
Yeah, because you can make a different choice.
Yeah, exactly. I can't thank you enough for being here today.
Wait. Before you go, I want to ask you just...
Oh, one more question for Georgia. One more question for Georgia. Sorry.
We missed out on something major. You're moving to Italy tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah.
So before
I was going
you-
to say that. I was like making the time and then Italy.
Oh, okay. Sorry to cut you off.
No.
I got worried because I really wanted to talk
wanted to
about
address
this. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about more specifically is, number one, you're moving to Italy tomorrow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What a
excited.
big step.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I think my question is about jumping off cliffs, you know? Like, I feel like moving to Italy, I'm moving to New York in a week. I'll
Yeah.
be back all the time to shoot the podcast, don't worry. But I'm moving to New York in a week, which feels like a big step, and it is a big step for a lot of people. But Italy is another big step altogether. How did you make that decision? And what advice would you have for somebody who's considering jumping off a cliff like that?
Okay. Well, here's how the decision came about. Emily and I we wanted to live together. We were looking for places, not struggling to find the right place. We found a place that was pretty good. We made a list of must-haves, great to haves, good to haves. And this place hit a lot of those items, but it was probably a B-. So we saw it, we applied for it, they accepted our application, but they needed us to move in like 2 months earlier than what would have been the best thing. So Emily wanted it, but we were unsure. And ultimately we decided that the timing created too much pressure. It wasn't the right thing. And you know, it created a little bit of anxiety. How we chose to approach it with a perspective of this or something better. So it's either going to be this apartment or it's going to be something better that we can't even yet imagine or fathom. Now, if we're attached to that apartment being the thing, we totally close ourselves down to other options, and we panic when that thing lets us know that it's not available. It's a fear thing to do, to see that as the option. Whereas if we're operating with this sense of like, yes, this is a beautiful thing, it would be great, but also like the universe wants to give us things. Like of course the universe wants to give us things.
Yeah.
We love everything. Like the restaurants, of course restaurants want to have us sit in there. We're the kindest to the wait staff. Of course they want us in there. So we operate with that perspective of like being super loving, being kind seems to create this relationship with life where amazing solutions are attracted to us and show up because things want to be treated with kindness and love. So operating with that perspective, we're coming up with solutions and not finding any great solutions, and then the idea just popped in to move to Italy. And going through our list of great to have, good to have, must-haves, great to have, good to have, it was the best possible option. So operating with that perspective of relaxation and loving the unknown, falling in love with the unknown, because trusting that something in the unknown is going to be created and presented that's better than what we could have known. That seems to be this process that she and I both practice that allows amazing solutions to come into our lives. So then we recognize the solution. We had this very measurable list, this very like masculine energy, measurable list of the things that we want, but we're also operating with Emily's golden gut. Like her intuition is on another level, and the more we listen to that, the better life gets.
Wow.
And it was right for her. So like, done deal, this is what we're doing. We're gonna take the leap. So in terms of taking the leap, she and I both love the unknown because we trust ourselves in places of uncertainty, because we know what we want, which is joy. And I know that in any situation that I'm in, I can walk into any room, I can be in any place, I'm in a relationship with joy and curiosity and love. That's the thing that's happening for me. So I can step into a space where I'm uncertain or I don't know, and I trust myself to experience joy and love in that place. So in terms of taking the leap, like it's a leap, but it's really just like, okay, well, this is fun, bold option that seems likely to generate these internal and external results for us. And there's no fear, because what's there to be afraid of if we meet everything with curiosity? Whereas if you see things as monsters to be afraid of, you're always going to be afraid of monsters. Whereas if you see monsters as just other organisms or other beings that you can be curious about, there's always nourishment or something to lean into. So in terms of the fear, we're not operating with a lot of fear. It really is it's just feeling like a very nourishing decision for both of us. One more piece of it, which is important, she and I both have a tendency to make big decisions as a way of running away from things. So
Same.
yeah, we all get that, right?
The runaway
Running
pattern.
away,
Yeah.
yep. Run away, escape. Don't actually make anything better, just make the bad thing go away, maybe even make the bad thing worse. What we asked ourselves is like, what are the specific and measurable things in our life that will let us know we're not doing that, that will let us know that this is a choice about expansion and nourishment and not the same old pattern of running away. So what does our business need to look like? What does money need to look like? What does this need to look like? How will we know this is a safe, expansive choice and not one that's just continuing the same old pattern?
Wow.
I mean, I think that's such an amazing way of approaching the whole thing. I'd never considered, even though it's sort of obvious now that you've described it, that jumping off a cliff or not jumping off a cliff is sort of a fear-based decision, isn't it? Or choosing not to is a fear-based decision. Whereas if you want to pursue joy and love and happiness, then, you know, you got to follow that, whatever that decision is.
It's a perspective of life that I really love. Is like what most people are trying to do is to brace themselves for impact at the end of the fall, or to cling on to something, to hold on to something, grasp onto something. When the truth is that yes, you are falling. There's nothing to grasp onto, and there's no ground to hit. So all you can really do, you can either continue hoping that there's something to grasp onto, or you can ask yourself, all right, if I'm infinitely falling, then what's the experience of falling I want to have? Well, I want to learn to fly. I want it to be fun. I want it to be creative and beautiful and graceful, which is like why surfing is so amazing. It's like same kind of thing.
Is there good surfing in Italy?
Not amazing. In what's it called? Sardinia?
Sardinia, yeah.
Supposedly there's some on, I think, the West Coast, but I don't think it's amazing. And that's something that we're going to have to navigate.
At least you're in close proximity to lots of other wonderful places in Europe where you can get some good breaks.
That's the vision. Yes.
Yeah. You've been amazing.
Yeah, I know.
You both have been
Thank
amazing.
you. Thank you so much. I've learned so much from you, and I hope everyone listening will, and have a little journal ready while you're listening, obviously.
I can't wait to go home and take notes.
Yeah. No, thank you for making the time, and good luck with your trip to Italy. Not even trip, your new home, Italy.
Like mid-length temporary home, but yes, thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Thank you both for being such amazing hosts and
Oh my
asking
gosh,
fantastic questions.
Thank you. Last question. Can we come and visit you and Emily?
Emily was like, when you go there, your mission today is to invite them to come to Italy with you. So yes, 100%.
I was thinking that while I was talking to you. I was like, would he take any guess?
100%.
Take any guess.
Where we're staying, I think has 3 bedrooms, I think. So
oh, wow.
We did that with the intention of having friends come. Obviously, you're friends. So that was my mission today, to invite you to come. So yes.
Oh, yay.
We're so excited.
Italy is calling.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you,
Flynn.
Yep, thank you.
Appreciate it.